This panel is composed of both Europeans and Americans and Africans. It's a unique group of people who've come together here. In many ways, as equally powerful as the people we've been listening to on the panel just now. We have Stefan Schmitz at the far end, who has a long career in the German government, German federal government, and recently, well, I think it was about 3 years ago, launched the great program on One World, No Hunger. Next to him is Nachilala Nkombo, who has worked in NGOs of various kinds, and now is the director of the One campaign. Next to her is Gebisa Ejeta, who is Ethiopian, of course, but is a great plant breeder of sorghum based in Purdue. We always hear a lot about Purdue. Then Ousmane Badiane, who was also trained in Germany and is now the director of IFPRI based in Africa. And finally, Joachim von Braun, next to me here, who was, as many of you know, the director of IFPRI and is now running a great research department at Bonn University and has recently been elected as the president of the Pontifical Academy. You can't get much higher than that. Well, you can, but that would depose the Pope, I think.
Not as a Protestant.
Yes, that's right. I should also just add that many of the people on the panel are also members of the new Malibu-Montpellier panel, and there are other people who are part of that new panel in the audience. And if you want to know what it does, you just look up on the web Malibu-Montpellier panel. I'll hand over to Joachim now to run this discussion. Thank you, Joachim.
Thank you so much, Gordon, for this nice introduction. Gordon is a member of the Malabo-Montpellier panel. He humbly hid that from you. I'm very pleased to moderate this panel, and let me underline that this is an international panel focused on food and agriculture, and with a particular emphasis on nutrition. In the end, agriculture is to improve people's livelihood, their satisfaction with life, and that very much depends on nutrition. So talking about agriculture is not enough. We have to go for the additional, not last mile, these are several miles to transform the market and production and public services systems into good nutrition outcomes. It is 12 years ago that some of us were together in a conference which we co-organized, organized by IFPRI in Kampala, Uganda. 500 African leaders in the room, including 3 presidents from not only Uganda, but also Nigeria and Senegal. And Norman Borlaug gave a powerful speech, and at the end, he shouted at them, at us in the audience, action, action, action. So, has action happened? Actually, I think yes. Maybe 2 actions, but not 3 is what Norm really asked for. Nutrition improved in Africa, and the report which we will present to you today by the Malabo-Montpellier panel, called Nourished, How Africa Can Build a Future Free from Hunger and Malnutrition, we have a few copies out there, documents the tremendous success some countries, actually we look at 7 countries, have made. And our panel members, the first 3 speakers on our panel, will say why. What did they got right? What have they gotten right? And Our fourth panel speaker will mainly emphasize the experiences of the German presidency leading this year's G20, the G20 nations, the leading industrialized and emerging economy nations. So Germany had the opportunity to influence the agenda this year, and there was strong emphasis on Africa and on food and nutrition security, which we hope will continue when Argentina takes the presidency next year. Actually, I have good signals from Argentina to have a strong emphasis on agriculture development, sustainable land use, healthy soils, and food security in their emerging agenda. The panel has been introduced. You can read more about us in the beautiful brochures. I don't repeat. Ousmane, you have the floor.
Thank you, Joachim. Thank you, everyone, and good morning. I've been asked to present the work of the Malabo-Montpellier panel. I'm waiting for the PowerPoint to be loaded so we can get started. Why the Malabo-Montpellier panel and forum? It's because we want to learn from progress. For the first time in the history of Africa, we have had solid 2 decades of unprecedented growth. There's been quite a bit of positive change across the continent. We still do face challenges, however. So if we want to meet those challenges in the future, then there's no better way than looking at what works on the ground, learning from the opportunities that we have seen that have driven that progress. So the main thing that the Montpellier Malabo Panel Forum would like to do is to seize the opportunities that exist around Africa, to learn from past progress, to help spread the progress and have more people and more countries make progress. You look at the maps of growth in Africa in the 90s and 2000, the darker the color of a country, the higher its growth rate, more countries are growing and are growing much faster. Despite the challenges that we have, what can we learn from that? What happened? We've never had something like that in the 60 years of post-colonial Africa. You look at across the continent again, countries are spending more for agriculture, almost doubled between the 90s and the 2000s, the annual outlays, and agricultural domestic products has grown by 2/3. On the nutrition and poverty front, again, there have been a decrease in poverty, and there have been decrease in malnutrition, depending on which indicator you use. The question is not the magnitude and the impact, but the how and the whys, so that we can learn from that. So what the Malabo-Montpellier panel does differently is to try and find out where there is progress in any strategic area in Africa, understand what works, why it works and how, and draw lessons in order to enhance progress where it exists and spread it broadly to where it doesn't exist. But because it doesn't just stop at understanding and finding out what works, that has to be translated into action. We have the Malabo-Montpellier Forum, which creates a space for leaders at the highest level, those who set the agenda, those who direct what happens. We engage with decision makers at ministerial level to disseminate and encourage adoption of the best practices. Basically, you have 10 to 12 ministers in one room to go through what we figured out in every specific area is working, why is working, and how it's working. Here are the members of the panel. You can see them on the website. I'm not going to talk much about it. Here's the first report on nutrition, what works in fighting malnutrition in Africa, what can we learn from that? Which are the countries that are making progress? What do they do right? How does it work, actually? And why does it work in those countries? You have here 7 countries we looked at that have made the most progress in using the Global Hunger Index of IFPRI, between 40 to 6% reduction over a 10-year period. There are 12 recommendations in the report, and you will find, I think, some outside in the resource table. 12 recommendations are in there. I'm just going to be talking about 3 of them. At the policy level, those countries have elevated nutrition as a top policy priority for the entire government. They have defined clear action agenda items across parts of governments. Ministries and agents have worked on that. And programmatically, they have worked on the ground in a proactive way to target interventions, to find problems where they are, and have actions that work. You could find details in the report, but that's what summarizes and that's what sets them apart. Those lessons will be taken now to the Malabo-Montpellier Forum, where ministers from those countries that really achieved the most progress and ministers from other countries are going to be sitting around the table. The Malabo-Montpellier Forum is chaired or co-chaired by the Right Honorable Dr. Solus Klaus Chilima, VP of Malawi, and His Excellency Abdoulaye Biochane, the Minister of Planning and Development for the Republic of Benin. So the first meeting based on this report is taking place in November 14 in Cotonou, bringing ministers from those different parties. Thank you, and this is the work of the Malabo panel and the Malabo-Montpellier Forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ousmane. Gebisa, you're next. I want to run through the panel. If someone of you has a very urgent question in between, walk up to the microphone, and hopefully I see you. Currently, I see nobody. Gebisa.
Yes, thank you. I would like to begin by establishing that this report on how Africa can build a future free from hunger and malnutrition is premised on the aspirations of the Sustainable Development Goal #2 that asks for ending hunger, achieve food security, and increase nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. Combining the aspirations of the nutrition community and the sustainable agricultural community in a single statement, this report attempts to do, requires elevating the dialogue and synergizing efforts so that to align the goals of nutrition and sustainable agriculture sectors into a common and even more ambitious agenda.
Our colleagues are coming back from their policy lobbying session outside with the previous panel. Let them walk in, and then we calm down. Can we get the door closed? Thank you. Back.
Combining these two agendas into a common goal is not necessarily a complex agenda, and it's not because, in principle, fundamentally it's not complex, and it's not because they are in any way diametrically opposed to each other. A productive, diverse, ecologically and socially sustainable agricultural system has long been recognized as being crucial for shaping healthy diets and improve human nutrition. The 1937 League of Nations report on the relation of nutrition to health, agriculture, and economic policy recognized the importance of agricultural adaptation for dietary diversification, noting that changes in production decisions that supported more fruits and vegetables could lead to nutritional benefits. As history would have it, at the end of the Second World, however, the urgency of the time shifted the agenda and focus so that increasing food production emerged as fundamental to fighting hunger, reducing social inequalities, and lifting families out of poverty. Decades of generous research investment created and established international agricultural research centers, provided opportunities for brilliant scientists, the first generation of scientists, such as Norman Borlaug, M.S. Swaminathan, Henry Bischel, and Gurdev Kush, just to limit the names to those that worked on wheat and rice, the opportunities to generate green revolution technologies of high-yield wheat and rice, doubling cereal yields in Latin America and Asia. However, part of that legacy led to persistent emphasis on expanding production of a short list of staples. Just 3 food crops today, rice, maize, and wheat, provide nearly 2/3 of global dietary energy intake. The global supply of ancient grains, pulses, fruits, and vegetables, the primary sources of diversity in most diets of the old world, became insufficient to meet recommended population level intake. At the same time, agriculture increasingly became an engine not only for producing food, but for generating animal feed, biofuels, and industrial ingredients for processed food products, including sugared, sweetened beverages, ready-to-eat meals, and snacks. In any case, as you would know, Africa missed on the Green Revolution with its many successes and its few limitations. Aspirations that are now embedded in the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, the Africa Union's Agenda 2063, and the Malabo Declaration, and that we try to focus on this morning in our report, Nourished, are meant to enhance the chances in which Africa will become both a contributor and beneficiary towards a future free from hunger and malnutrition. To have this chance, Africa's food and agriculture sector should be expected to provide integrative solutions that combine malnutrition on multiple fronts across the spectrum, from deficiencies of energy and micronutrients to fighting overconsumption, obesity, and related diseases. Unfortunately, in a continent so nakedly exposed to climate change and associated shocks and distresses, including conflicts and protracted crises, recurring famine and vulnerabilities in food and nutrition continue to persist. Unlocking Africa's agriculture sector in a way that captures synergies among nutrition, health, and food production would necessitate an integrative approach of major decision-making entities. All these entities ranging from consumers and households, farmers and producers, research and development organizations, NGOs and civil science societies, organizations, governments and agencies that enable investments in science, technology, innovation, and markets, as well as promulgate policy instruments. Orchestrating these integrative approaches is the challenge that we face. Policy decisions will need to be communicated in a consistent and clear message to guide the goals in food production in Africa. If the goals of agriculture are to be aligned with our aspirations of healthy diet, diversity of crops must be prioritized along the critical goals of enhancing staple crop productivity. As a plant breeder, to achieve the Malabo Declaration targets of reducing stunting, wasting, and underweight, and ensuring diversity of women and meeting minimum dietary standards for African infants by 2025, a revitalized African food system that involves research, development, policy perspective will need to include a variety of options and recommendations. One, we need to improve major staples for nutritional quality via biofortifications and build reliable avenues for their delivery and impact. Second, we need investment to improve nutrient-dense ancient grains, both African and introduced, for greater productivity. Third, we need to expand and introduce the production and use of pulses, fruits, and vegetables into many more communities. There is an enormous unrealized market potential in the production of ancient grains, pulses, fruits, and vegetables in African communities that could contribute to new livelihood opportunities for millions of smallholder farmers. These same crops are essential for preventing undernutrition, obesity, and diet-related diseases that together contribute to increases in health-related costs and lost productivity. Parallel efforts are needed to strengthen the functioning of markets and adapting food value chains to accompany these enhanced production efficiencies. It will require massive campaign for evidence-based behavioral change education, strategies that reflect that enormously successful barrage of commercial marketing approaches used by the food and beverage industry that promote highly processed food and beverages so that we may instill appreciation and respect for the importance and values of quality diet and nutrition. Wholesome food systems also have the potential to affect food safety, exposure to infectious illnesses, food prices, household income, and women's access to productive resources, all of which are key mediators of nutrition and health. Finally, furthermore, as the report clearly states, since much of the data necessary for policy action are not readily available in many African countries, data platforms need to be built, metrics harmonized, and tracking systems established to effectively combat malnutrition and to proactively fend off nutritional problems before a food crisis erupts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Unless a healthy diet is grown, it won't be in the households. Thank you very much. Nachilala, you're on.
All right. Thank you very much, Joachim. And also I should take the opportunity to thank the World Food Prize Committee and Ambassador Queen for giving us this opportunity to discuss one of the biggest challenges of our time that's facing the food system globally. The food system is failing to provide adequate and nutritious food to everyone that needs it. And our hope is that through this panel, we can share some of the experiences from 7 African countries that face the same challenge and have made progress. I want to say that this is a big issue for us, particularly in Africa, because 45% of child mortality, malnutrition accounts for 45% of child mortality. This is a big issue that we should care about. That means that we should change the steps that we've taken in terms of dealing with the problem of malnutrition. As an African leader myself, I think my point of departure is to look at what existing targets have been put in Africa to combat the problem of malnutrition. I think Gebisa touched on them to say that our African leaders during the Malabo African Union Heads of State Summit committed themselves to reduce stunting, committed themselves to reduce malnutrition by 2025. I think the benefits of doing that are not only because we will reduce the number of children that are dying from malnutrition. I think we heard yesterday from one of our biggest champions in the fight against malnutrition, the Laureate, Dr. Akin Adesina. He made it very clear to us that the reason why he launched the African Leaders on Nutrition is because there's also an economic cost to keeping children malnourished. The levels of stunted children we have today means that our economies and opportunities in future, including for the burgeoning African population, will not be created. So I think those are one of the sort of the key points that we need to take a look at. I think also, if we are going to address the problem of malnutrition, we need then to cleverly look at how we harness the agriculture opportunity. I think in the last panel, there's a mention of who is not on the table, which voices are not represented. But I think I should say that I'm coming from a country where I can brag that my minister from Zambia is the only one who's in the audience and is here listening to this panel and also listening to views and perspectives from other people. She's got a plan in terms of how to revitalize agriculture. She's got a plan to build agriculture city. And what that means is that activity won't just be on the farm. It means that there will be a range of infrastructure, health infrastructure, education infrastructure that will be created, that we've learned through our report that it's not just about a single shot bullet that is needed to address dramatically the malnutrition problem. A number of the countries, including the ones that are war-torn like Angola, were able to reduce the malnutrition problem by putting together a set of policies. They actually implemented comprehensive policies that range from not only agriculture and health, but looking at other sectors such as water and sanitation. So I think going forward, it's important that we really keep drumming the beat that to win the fight against malnutrition, It's not a single approach that's going to win the fight. We have to be embarrassed enough about the situation. In my country, 37% of children are stunted, right? That's the statistics that angers me, and that also angers my minister. And so next year, when we come back to the World Food Prize, we'll be able to share with you what we have done about the situation. I also wanted to say that malnutrition is also a political question. If the issue of dealing with malnutrition is not put on top of the political agenda, progress will not be achieved. And what we found from the 7 countries that we studied, from Angola to Senegal to Cameroon, this is an issue that was put on at the highest level of government, either in the presidency, either in the National Planning and Development Commission, or the Prime Minister's office. And the other thing that was a common feature amongst the successful countries was that there was investment in data. There was seriousness in terms of tracking progress. In the previous session, I think there were 4 principles that were mentioned as crucial to help us move forward: transformation, alignment, integration. From this panel, I would like to add that accountability is very important. And you cannot be accountable if you're not investing in data. So one of the recommendations that we're putting forward, based on what we've seen has worked in other countries, is that countries that are doing poorly need to make the necessary investments in tracking progress around malnutrition. I think the other point I wanted to also add is that because of the multi-sectoral nature of the challenge of dealing with malnutrition, no one person can do it alone. No one sector of the entire society can do it alone. This is not just a problem for government to deal with, right? So in most of these countries, there was strong collaboration across different sectors, from private sectors. Private sector was very much involved in Ghana in terms of bringing forward solutions that help to fast-track progress. Civil society also playing their role in terms of doing the education and delivery of certain programs that were needed. So I just wanted to underscore the other principle that was raised in the previous panel on the importance of partnership for us to win this war. And again, I want to come back on the economic imperative of this. We know that most of our governments struggle with finances in terms of making decisions, in terms of where they put their limited resources. But the good news is that when you make investments in nutrition, the data that exists out there is that a $1 investment in nutrition gets back for the economy $16. So that makes economic sense. I mean, we have a moral obligation to deal with this. And I think we've really been shown that without bold and consistent action, that's multi-sectoral and implementation. I think part of the challenge we normally have is that we have a whole range of good policies, good knowledge that's gathered, but it's not implemented. And in all the 7 countries, each one of them were very serious in making sure that each government department and ministry that was responsible was implementing, was budgeting the resources that are needed, and was implementing and accounting. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I guess I'll pass it on to Stefan.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Nachilala, for mentioning and emphasizing the need for policy change. It's no surprise that this document, the Malabo-Montpellier report on improved nutrition in Africa, has half of its recommendation really as policy innovations, which need to come along with the seed innovations and the technological side, which Gebisa emphasized. The policy innovations are the ones which made the trick in the 7 countries which have been presented and which we analyzed in this report systematically. Stefan, this year, 2017, has been a particularly dense one for you. As Deputy Director General of the Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, not only due to G20, but mainly so. And tell us a bit what came out and how you see the future of the cooperation, which we have also heard as a recommendation from the administrator of USAID, Mr. Green. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Joachim. 4 years ago, the BMZ, the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, launched a One World, No Hunger initiative. And most of you, I think, you are perhaps familiar with the Feed the Future initiative of the US government. It's about the same idea of a comprehensive approach to that challenge. Under this initiative, Germany has been able to considerably increase its effort to address the issue of hunger and malnutrition, and has become one of the largest donors in this field, next to the European Commission, the United States, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This One World No Hunger initiative has a strong focus on Africa and follows, in generally speaking, 3 goals. First, promote innovation and increase productivity in the agriculture and food sector. Second, make sure that no one is left behind, that everybody, and in particular vulnerable groups, women and children, have access to affordable and nutritious food. And third, promote a sustainable use of and an equal, secure access to natural resources. We see the need in particular to stop and reverse land degradation, in particular in Africa, which seems to be a serious problem, and to improve land governance and land rights. We have not only launched targeted bilateral programs and contributed to multilateral endeavors. We also took the chance to co-shape the international food security agenda. In particular, we took advantage of the fact that Germany was holding first G7 presidency in 2015 and is still, as Joachim pointed to, holding G20 presidency this year. Under German presidency in 2015, the G7 agreed to help 500 million people out of hunger and malnutrition by 2030. Thus, the G7 took adequate responsibility and their share to reach SDG 2. But the G7 have not only set this strong numerical target, they also agreed on how to reach that ambitious goal. They agreed on a so-called broad approach. They underlined that higher yields, higher productivity in agriculture is necessary but not sufficient to solve the problem. They underscored their commitment not just to invest in agriculture, but also in nutrition-related measures, resource management, and land governance. These are the main extra miles we all have to go. This year, again under German presidency, the G20 once again underlined the link between food security, agriculture, and broader rural development. They put an emphasis on rural youth employment. Today, 1.2 billion young people between ages 15 and 24 live in the world. In Africa alone, 440 million young people will enter the labor market by 2030, a majority of them in rural areas. This is a tremendous challenge that must be turned into an opportunity. The youth bulge we were all talking about must be turned into a demographic dividend. The rural youth must become the drivers of inclusive rural transformations and create opportunities for sustainable development that provide them with adequate quality life prospects. The future of the rural world. This was the title of a G20 conference in Berlin in April this year. More than 1,000 participants, among them very many young people from civil society, private sector and science, discussed and adopted the Berlin Charter for Rural Development. This charter provides very valuable guiding principles and policy recommendations for rural development. It was very encouraging to see the enthusiasm and the commitment of the young people in this conference, and in particular in the whole preparatory process. And their signal, their political signal was very, very clear. They stay ready and they are willing and able to make a difference and to improve livelihoods and to take the responsibility and invest in agriculture and food chain if the political framework conditions are right and the environment is conducive. And that was very, very clear. The G20 heads of states and government referred to this Berlin Charter when, in July in Hamburg, they launched the Initiative for Rural Youth Employment. This initiative is unique and ambitious. For the first time, the G20 agreed on very specific numerical targets, for example, enabling 5 million young people to benefit from training opportunities and creating 1 million jobs for young people by 2022. But how can a transformation of the rural economy in Africa be achieved? Where are the job opportunities? What can be done to increase the quality of jobs? The World Bank and IFPRI together presented a very interesting study to the G20 helping to answer these questions. They identified 3 action areas. First, promote growth in the food value chains. Second, ensure that policies don't undermine employment intensity. And 3, facilitate the inclusion of women and youth. Now Germany starts to facilitate and to take the lead in the implementation of this initiative. It is very encouraging to see that the issue of rural employment, in particular rural youth employment, receives tremendous attention around the world. It's not only the World Bank and IFPRI. It's, for example, the Sahel and West Africa Club hosted by the OECD. The Chicago Council on Global Affairs now focuses on this issue. Many donors, the African Development Bank, as we heard earlier this morning. We all definitely now should join forces. We should aim at a common understanding of the issue with a strong evidence base, and we should aim at a strong voice. We all should work towards making sure that we overcome the rural-urban divide. The rural world must not be left behind. Instead of becoming a loser in globalization, the rural world must fully benefit from innovation, modernization, and a fair globalization. Germany aims to overcome the traditional donor-recipient relationship. We would like to enter into a new real partnership with Africa, guided by mutual trust and mutual accountability. This is the essence of the Marshall Plan with Africa that has recently been proposed by Germany. In such a partnership, investment is key. Investment in knowledge, in infrastructure, in people, and innovation. And all sources of money is needed. Domestic resources, private sector investment, as well as official development, development assistance. We are committed to focus our support on reform processes. In this context, we invite Africa to high-level political dialogue. Dialogue with Africa requires an African voice and Africa ownership. Therefore, we very much welcome and support, for example, the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, CAADP, and the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA, and many other initiatives. And last but not least, we very much appreciate the work of the Malabo-Montpellier panel, a unique forum that facilitates North-South political dialogue based on sound evidence base. Thank you very much.
Well, you have heard our panelists. Please get ready for your comments and questions. We need your input. We are eager to get comments on the Malabo-Montpellier panel report and on the cooperation agenda, which Stefan has laid out. The two are, of course, closely connected. I see there is a line of 3 over there and a line of 1 over there. I start with the 1 over there, please. Introduce yourself. Go ahead.
My name is Deepak, and I'm a graduate student in plant pathology, University of Minnesota. And I have a question regarding diversification of food or dietary diversification. We were talking about some of the countries that have gained success in implementing nutrition as well as reducing hunger to a certain extent. How is dietary diversification relevant to Native American cuisine? Is it going to be a cultural change for people to adapt as well, if we are going to implement foreign crops into the countries? And how is dietary diversification cooperated with the aim to feed all mouths and elevate hunger? Thanks.
Great, thank you. We take notes, please. First in that line.
My name is Jacqueline Steinkamp, and I work for Self-Help International, an NGO that works in Nicaragua and Ghana. I worked in Nicaragua for several months, and my question is, as we talk about resiliency, sustainability, and development in all corners of the world, do you think we can apply, or are you seeing it applied, the application of best practices in what's considered developed countries to developing countries in sustainable and environmentally friendly approaches in tandem with development? For example, Germany is considered to be a leader in green infrastructure. Can we apply more green infrastructure rather than gray as we work together in development, especially seeing the issues with climate change?
Okay, second in that line.
Thank you very much. My name is Bongiwe Njobe. I'm South African, but I'm here in my capacity as the chair of the Global Forum for Agricultural Research. I'd just like to, I'm very excited by the outcome of the Montpellier Malabo panel, particularly because of its African political leadership in driving implementation. My question to the panel is, do you think, based on the work that you did on nutrition, there's an opportunity for a nutrition-led growth strategy for agriculture in Africa? If so, what would be the risks and opportunities that would present for us?
Thank you. Next.
Julie Howard from Michigan State University. Very happy to hear all of the talk about evidence and accountability from this panel, but I'd like to have an update on how we're doing in terms of setting up data systems at the national level and regional level. Are those improving? That's been a continuing problem over the years. On accountability, as I seem to recall, as part of the Malabo agreement, there was meant to be a national accountability session each year to review progress on agriculture and nutrition. Could we have an update on that? And finally, really happy to hear all of the discussion about rural youth employment, but there's very, very little evidence there. There's been very little funding for funding impact evaluation, so I'm wondering what the panel's position is. Thank you.
Good. Next, please.
My name is Timothy Williams. I work for the International Water Management Institute.
Please speak up.
My name is Timothy Williams. I work for the International Water Management Institute. It was really very good to hear the summary of the Montpellier panel report on nutrition. But I think the challenge facing Africa is doubly difficult in terms of climatic change happening across the continent, and also the issue of conflict and states coming out of fragile states. And my question really is, do we really have a nuanced approach to the heterogeneity in Africa in terms of tackling nutrition? Because from what I've heard, it seems as if the program is more or less uniformly based across the continent, but we do know that there's so much heterogeneity, and the problems, especially in conflict-ridden states, is very much.
Extremely important point. I'm sure there are lots of more important points in the audience. We have to wrap this up in 5 minutes. Those at the microphone, you have 1 sentence each. Either make a powerful point or a question. Please go ahead, and then the two of you. That's it.
Thank you. Anthony Zui from University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. I was wondering whether the panel could say something about the state of evidence that's available about forms of collective organization and networks of rural farmers and communities in engaging around these agendas.
Great point. Go ahead.
My name is Christian Scott from Pennsylvania State University. And I'm wondering, you talked about the role of incorporating vulnerable populations. And I'm wondering about risk and the perceptions and the realities of risk specifically facing these vulnerable populations.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Pole. I come from KALRO, which is Kenya Agriculture and Livestock Research Organization. To the Minister for Agriculture, I think in Zambia, I don't think our African children need to be suffer malnutrition anymore, because we are endowed with a lot of local crops. In Kenya, we have finger millet and sorghum. These are crops that can provide all the nutrition that the children need. So maybe we can dialogue later on, and I'll give you some insights on some of these crops that can improve child malnutrition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Panel members, it's as usual, too little time for too big an agenda, but there's lunch break and there's email thereafter. I go the same direction, Ousmane. Pick and choose, but don't pick the easy ones.
Okay.
Yeah?
I'll pick the hardest ones. All right, thank you. First on, can we have a nutrition-driven agriculture development agenda? Or how do we deal with heterogeneity on dealing with nutrition? I think we can put those two together. Where we're starting from is that, especially nutrition, this will be maybe different in different cases. We should have much better nutrition outcomes with the resources we have at hand. We're underachieving because many governments are just at a loss. They don't know where to start and how to do it, how to wrap their hands around these problems. So that's why we think that figuring out where things are working and how it's working and why, and giving people the sense of being able to enact change to achieve better results with the resources they have, while they can harness more resources for much bigger results, is extremely important. Now, whether we call it nutrition-based agriculture development or how we deal with heterogeneity, we think that showing what works and why and how it works, and then addressing the leaders at the highest level, those who will take and set the agenda to understand that there's a possibility to make change here. Next, on accountability and numbers and data, there have been an amazing thing that happened this year. The first, actually it's happening now, the first round of the biennial review that African heads of states have mandated. They have asked all the countries to come and report every 2 years on each and every of the targets under Malabo. We've been working very hard, we IFPRI and our programs in Africa, to support countries to prepare and deliver the reports. 43 out of 55. And you know, out of those 55, there are some that wouldn't do it, Central African Republic, Somalia, and so on. So mostly more than 90% of those who would have turned in a report. And it's been quite a successful round. It's going to the ministers in the coming weeks and to the heads of states in January. And the data system and the review systems are in place in those countries.
I'll take up that question about diversifications and the concerns about investments in research in that area. I think, you know, the developed world is doing very well in diversifying their diets, concepts understood about the variety of foods to eat. And then over time, through globalization, I can't, I'm extremely amazed in 40 years since I started living in the United States, how diets have changed in the US, and now global plates, the plates are representing the diversity of the world. The endowments nature had given us is really represented daily in the plates of my family and others in the United States. But the concern that we're expressing, excuse me, is with all the endowments that we have around the world and the blessings that have come to the world from the old world, and unfortunately, the old world's diets had shrunk with climate change and the pressures from the market, and also emphasis on the few major crops that have really benefited from investments in agricultural research. And now, as palates get sophisticated in the developed world, these incredible ancient grains of the old world are finding themselves on the plates of people in the developed world. And so unfortunately, with limited investment in those crops to increase their productivity, the few production tonnage that we get in the developed world end up on the plates of people in the developed world, and not meeting the crucial diet needs of people in developing countries. And so that's part of what the recommendation we're making is that I think these empty calories that are in the major crops of sorghum and corn and so on need to go through biofortifications to benefit an enhancement of nutritional quality. At the same time, we need productivity gains incorporated through investment in research in these ancient grains, the grains like teff in my country, where the poor, my neighborhood, my village that produces a lot of teff, I don't see them on the plates of people in the villages. They go to the market because they fetch more money for them. The same for quinoa and chia, amaranth from Latin America. And so these double approaches or multi-approaches of asking for greater investment so that the benefits of the results of technology generation from enriching the endowments that nature had given us could be exploited fully is the essence of the message.
Colleagues, we are in overtime. So very brief, Nachilala.
I'll be super brief. So the climate change challenge and the conflict challenge do make the situation worse and vulnerable in Africa because of the effects on the quality of the crop and the output. But I think for us, what we're saying from our report is that the answer is to ensure that the research agenda connects with the climate variations that are happening, because the consequence of not doing that is that the amount of food that's available will go down, and the food prices are also going to go up. So in West Africa, they have what is called the West African Service Center on Climate Change and Adaptive Land Use. 10 countries are participating and are investing in that. So we need more African countries participating in that, and maybe more partners coming on board to support that, to support African countries respond to the climate challenge.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to pick up the question of transfer of experience, of knowledge, and so. Of course, this is a crucial point, but I would say next to North-South learning and dialogue, South-South learning is equally important, and we all should think of how we could foster that kind of thing. Anyway, in this, well, coming back to the North-South exchange, and this panel is about these questions. I mean, Africa has two great challenges from my perspective. One is the trade issues. African internal trade is far too weak. There are lots of trade barriers of various kinds. And the other thing is many weak organizational structures. So there is really a great potential for improvement. And in this, when it comes to organizational, not technology in a narrower sense, but in the broader sense, how to manage a sector, how to manage a business, how to bring people together. create producer organizations and to give them a strong voice. That is something we can offer, not just from Germany, I think all over in Europe and the US. I think we had made good experience with that, with good policies. And we invite our partners to come to see in Germany how things run, and that's not everything they can learn from that. But there are a few things I think is good for learning and for dialogue. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Let me close with two remarks. One is lots of people think we live in troubled times. Ending hunger, the fight against hunger, must not be affected by this. Actually, I believe there is a large island of consensus to, in this time, address the hunger issue collectively across the Atlantic between Europe and the United States. Second remark is Africa has its own agenda. The development partners need to support that. That's what the Malabo-Montpellier panel is about, rather than imposing external agendas. And the third, which I didn't suggest at the beginning, Gordon, let's emphasize evidence-based and respect for science. That's it.
That's right. Just two things. Stefan, there's a South-South partnership that got launched here earlier this week between the Brazilians and the Africans on the savannas, and I think that's a most exciting partnership that's coming forward. And just going back to that last point of Joachim's, we're talking here about policies, new policies in particular, implementing policies that are evidence-based. That means the evidence from science, from technology, from the social sciences, from economics. That's the way we're trying to do it in the Montpellier panel. It's the way that One World, No Hunger is also trying to do it. It's the trademark of what we're all about these days. Thank you all. Thank you, the panel. The lunch is up one floor. Is that right? Yes. Up one floor right now, and Raj Shah is going to be speaking. That was good.